We have breaking news this afternoon from Moscow. Russian President Vladimir Putin is confirming that more than 750 American diplomats are being kicked out of the country. In an interview airing today on Russian state media, Putin says, and I'm going to quote here from the translation, "We waited for quite some time that maybe something would change for the better, fueled such a hope that the situation would somehow change. But judging by everything, if it changes, it will not be soon." That move, of course, comes just weeks after President Putin met with President Trump at the G20 summit in Hamburg, Germany. But now Mr. Trump is planning to sign a bill imposing tough new sanctions on Russia, in part because of the Kremlin's meddling in our election last year. Word of the expulsions first broke on Friday, but this is the first time that we have heard Vladimir Putin confirming the exact numbers. He says there now will be an equal number of Americans in Russia as the Russians have in the United States, 455 diplomats to be precise. With me now is Kendall Coffee, a former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida. Thank you so much for joining me. Of course, this skirmish is growing over expulsions, while at the same time there are still plenty of questions surrounding Jared Kushner and Donald Trump Jr. and Paul Manafort. They were all in touch with Congress last week. How much did we learn?
Well, what we're learning is that this case may not be focusing. It may actually be growing. It may be developing more tracks in the investigation than Grand Central Station. And that means one of the biggest challenges for Robert Mueller is how to focus this. I don't think he intends for this to go on for years. But if, in addition to the core issues, Russian collusion or falsification or obstruction related to that alleged collusion, are they going to start examining a lot of different business transactions of Donald Trump or associates of Donald Trump? That could cause this thing to go way beyond, I think, what was intended, and getting to the bottom of what happened in the United States election in 2016.
This expulsion of American diplomats from Russia, of course, does not fit the narrative that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are BFFs, as they say. How is this going to play into the ongoing investigation?
Well, I think that all of this means that the relations with Russia, ironically, which I think folks on both sides of the aisle thought might improve after Trump was elected, are actually going to get worse. And as we continue with what I think is, unfortunately, a more difficult, negative relationship with Russia, I think it's going to keep this investigation in the forefront. And I think it's going to continue to be a cloud that, for at least in the foreseeable future, the Trump presidency will not be able to shake.
Do you get the sense that the worst is behind Trump Jr., Manafort, Jared Kushner? Or you think that they're going to face more questions? At least in the case of Donald Trump Jr., I believe, he has not sat to face any questions as of yet.
I think up to now what we're seeing, if the issue is, did any of these individuals or other Trump operatives in the campaign criminally conspire with Russians who are hacking into the computers? I think that issue is starting to subside, because we're a long ways into this and there's no evidence of that criminal conspiracy. What remains to be addressed is, of course, along the way, did anyone lie? Did, for example, General Flynn fail to give information in a way that was amounted to falsification about his contacts, his relations, and what happens and what are the consequences of that? And I think that until the issues of General Flynn are resolved, and he has in some fashion had his issues resolved criminally with a plea bargain or whatever it may be, and he has been fully interviewed by the authorities, it's going to be hard to get to the bottom of whether there was any collusion, because he is more centrally placed than anybody to know whether or not there was some degree of collaboration between the Russian government and the Trump campaign.
As his situation, General Flynn, as Paul Manafort's, is sorted out in their ongoing conversations with authorities, Robert Mueller is, of course, still on the job as special counsel. There's talk that Attorney General Jeff Sessions could be moved to Homeland Security, replacing the new Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and that perhaps that would give President Trump a new opening to name a new AG who could, follow a Trump order to fire Robert Mueller, the special prosecutor. Do you get the sense that all of that would actually be perfectly legal in some way?
Well, some of it might be technically legal, but talk about a bad idea. And remember, the individuals, respected Republican senators that are saying, please don't do it. Trump being Trump might have got you elected, but it's a bad idea in the middle of a campaign. Those aren't just respected, important political leaders. In a worst-case scenario, if Robert Mueller comes out with a very negative report, people like, for example, Lindsey Graham, are going to be members or could be members of the jury that decides the fate of President Donald Trump. So it's a bad idea, whether it's legal or not.
All right, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. Kendall Coffee, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here on this Sunday.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. The inconvenient truth about climate change and the man on the mission to share them. Next, we're going to talk with the directors of Al Gore's newest documentary about the state of the environment 10 years on.